To get a herbicide to kill a plant, it needs to do three things. It needs to get inside the plant, it needs to get to the tissue where the herbicide works, so that might be leaf tissue or it might be the meristematic tissue, and then it needs to inhibit the active site. For the herbicide to get into the roots, it's going to be taken up just in ordinary water that moves through the plant. So it just flows in the water, which means that you generally have to have your herbicide soluble in water in the soil to get it to be taken up. That means that you need to understand the water solubility of the herbicide, and you need to understand the soil type, because it's a combination between how water soluble the herbicide is and how much it binds. So herbicides tend to bind more to soils with high clay content or organic matter and less to sandy soils. This also actually influences how far the herbicides move up and down in the soil. So very soluble herbicides will move a long way and they might get out of the root zone and not work because of that reason. If you're looking at a herbicide that gets taken up by the leaf, the environment's entirely different because the leaf's covered in a waxy cuticle. So here, herbicide chemistry comes into play. So some herbicide soluble in waxes and they will go through that cuticle just sort of with diffusion. Other herbicides aren't, and so they will move more slowly or they'll move through little pores in the cuticle. Charged herbicides, things like glyphosate, can find it quite difficult, and that's one of the reasons why glyphosate has such a long rainfastness time compared to some other herbicides. The route it has to take has got negative charges on it, so there's some repulsion, and here things like adding ammonium sulphate help with glyphosate just to get it into the leaf. Of course, now we've got the herbicide inside the plant, we've got to get it to where it needs to go. Most herbicides, because they have some water solubility, move in the xylem. The xylem goes from ground to air, so they're going to move up to the edges of the tips of the leaves. Some herbicides are phloem mobile, and they'll move back down the plant into the meristematic area. You know, glyphosate's a really good example of a phloem mobile herbicide. Herbicides like paraquat and atrazine are not really phloem mobile. Again, that's a lot about chemistry, but it's also about what's happening in the plant. So if you've got water stress, for example, well, first of all, the herbicides are not going to be taken up by the plant as readily, but they're also not going to move around because not a lot of water's flowing. Equally, they're not going to move in the phloem, in the photosynthate, because the plants aren't photosynthesizing when they're water stressed. The other thing that can happen to a herbicide inside the plant is it can be broken down. There are enzymes that degrade these. This is why a lot of our herbicides are selective in certain crops. They have those enzymes. Weeds often tend not to. But if you change the environment, you can change the amount of herbicide that gets broken down. And typically, again, we see this with stress. So stressed crops won't break down herbicides as fast. And that's why if you put out selective herbicides under stressful conditions, you might actually get more crop damage than you would under some other conditions. Temperature. Most things happen faster with temperature, so warmer conditions means your herbicides are going to get in faster, they're going to move faster, they're going to act faster. Of course, if you get very high temperatures, that produces temperature stress, and that tends to shut the plant down so things don't move around as fast. Frost is quite difficult because it does a number of complex things, but I think the important things are that it tends to reduce the amount of water moving in the plant, so herbicides aren't taken up as readily, and it also tends to shut the plant metabolism down, so herbicides aren't broken down as readily, they're not moved in the phloem as readily.